Hello, I am your host, Tracy Otsuka. Thank you so much for joining me here for another episode of ADHD for Smartass Women. You know that my purpose is always to show you who you are and then inspire you to be it. And in the thousands of women with ADHD that I've had the privilege of meeting, I've never met a one that wasn't truly brilliant at something, not one. So, of course, I am just delighted to introduce you to Kristyn Hodgdon today. Kristyn is the co-founder and chief creative officer of Rescripted, a global media platform for all women and their health from first period to last period. Kristyn has both PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, and ADHD, and discovered these diagnoses as an adult, a common experience for women in their 20s and 30s. After meeting with a fertility specialist while trying to get pregnant and later meeting with a psychiatrist. She is also a professional writer, voracious reader, fierce women's health advocate, and proud IVF mom of twins. She lives in Long Island, New York with her husband Dan, kids Brooke and Charlie, and mini Australian Shepherd Nash. Kristyn, did I get all of that right?
Yes, thank you for the wonderful introduction, Tracy. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. So, we're going to talk all about Rescripted, but the way we always start here is I always want to know a little bit about your ADHD diagnosis so that I can connect with you and our readers can connect with you. So, would you mind sharing how you got diagnosed? I mean, I guess we know it was after going through fertility treatment, right? But the
Yeah.
progression.
Yeah, so definitely like a long story, but I'll do my best to make it succinct. I did not suspect in a million years that I had ADHD. Always did well in school. When I was younger, like as a kid, I was in like in the 90s, it was like a gifted and talented program. I read from a young age. I was always interested in reading. There was no indicators as a young child that I had ADHD, at least to my knowledge. But then in high school, like looking back, it's so funny because when you're diagnosed with ADHD, as I'm sure you know, like hindsight is 2020. So at the time when I was in high school, I kind of considered myself like a little bit of a ditz, like a little bit of I'm forgetful, I'm goofy, I'm always late. I just,
So you struggle with time in terms of even understanding what time looked like how quickly time passed and
oh yeah, yeah. Just chaotic, I would say. I was joking around with my high school friends after I actually got my diagnosis, and they were like, "Wow, so much makes sense now." And I'm like, "You're telling me?" Like we all went up to my parents' Pennsylvania house for a weekend, our senior year of high school, and like halfway there, I was like, "Guys, I think I forgot the keys." Like things like that just always happened to me, but I was like always I mean, my grades always like were pretty good. I was, funny. I was an athlete. I just had like all these things that helped me sort of mask it. So it just never was really an issue other than it was really hard for me to focus in classes that did not immediately grasp my attention.
Mhm.
I would say that was like the one indicator for me looking back. If it was English, reading, writing, even history to some extent, like I was all in. But science and math were like pulling teeth. I just could not get it. I would literally have to write the chapter of the textbook, like copy it so that I could grasp it.
Wow.
Otherwise, like I was just reading a page and nothing was digesting. So, but
Can I ask
again,
you,
yeah.
was there internal hyperactivity, meaning that, just kind of the thoughts and the talking to yourself? Did you overthink things? Was there any rumination? Or you also said you were an athlete, right? So you were probably really busy
I was extremely
working out.
busy.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as much as I was a little chaotic, I in high school, I felt like I was very much myself and like confident and
Mm,
didn't really overthink because I was just part of all these different
yeah.
groups and like even in some AP classes like English AP, and so it wasn't until college and I went away, not far. I just went from New York to Connecticut, but went away to college, and that's where I started, I think, the overthinking started because I didn't really feel like I fit in at the school. Like I felt like I grew up in Queens, New York, so I'm like a city girl through and through. And it was kind of the campus was beautiful, which is why I fell in love with it and really great academics, but like a little bit of a preppy crowd. And I was like, oh, I don't know if this is my scene. And I mean, funny story is like I ended up transferring out sophomore year, and senior year I went back to visit, ended up meeting my husband, and we've been together for 15 years. But at the time, I just felt really out of place. Like I liked one of my roommates, but didn't really jive with the other two, and just never really felt like, I don't
You
know,
were in
at
the right
home.
environment.
Yeah, and that's also when anxiety started kicking in for me.
Mm.
Like I have a very tight-knit Italian family. Everyone lives within like 15 minutes of each other. So that whole thought of like being away from home and what if
Mm.
something happens while I'm at school and my family's at home and I'm the oldest of three. So just lots of like responsibility. And so I thought it was mostly anxiety. And so when I did start like seeking therapy and mental health support, it was more for anxiety. But when I ultimately got my ADHD diagnosis, I kind of like put two and two together that maybe it was more of like the overthinking from just not keeping my mind busy enough.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I always say that I've never met a woman or, frankly, a man with ADHD where there wasn't some anxiety. And why wouldn't that be if you feel like, there's just something different about my brain and how I think, and I don't know when my brain is going to actually show up and when it's going to be on vacation, right? So that
Hmm.
anxiety, if we don't understand that it's ADHD and, oh, this is how our brain works. Did you have that typical first year struggle in college beyond the social just because now all of your scaffolding, all of your structure that you had at home was now gone? And I'm wondering too if were you still what kind of athlete were you? What was your sport?
So I played softball in high school, and I also was on the cheerleading team. So two very different things. And I also did theater, so it was like all over the place.
But I'm wondering if you were working out to the level that you were working out as an athlete in that first
Um,
year of school, college.
I, looking back, it's funny because I love strength training and
Mm,
Pilates now, and working out has just been such a blessing for me, like mentally, even more than physically.
hmm.
But back then, I was like, I didn't even know how to work out after I stopped playing sports. So it was like going on the elliptical for 20 minutes and not really even getting my heart rate up. And I wasn't eating the right things. And so, yeah, that
Mm.
was definitely a component for sure.
And then that first year, was there that typical first year struggle that a lot of us go through in college because, again, all the scaffolding and structure has been removed and we have to figure out how to rebuild it?
It's interesting because I actually threw myself into school so much so
Mm.
that I ended up getting a 4.0.
Ah. And you were probably studying the right things, though, right? It wasn't like I
Yes.
went and studied science and math. Almost
Yes,
flunked out.
I did everything in my power to avoid any classes
Hmm.
that would not be, my cup of tea for sure.
Yeah, you were smarter than I was. And
I
I
was
also
an
had
English
this.
and communications major, so I was like working at the radio slash TV studio
Mm.
and doing classes surrounding that, and then also English was always my strength. So yeah.
Okay, so you go to get fertility treatment. I guess there's a problem, right? They do
Yeah.
a bunch of
So
tests. So walk us through that, what happened. And I know you said that when they said ADHD, you just about fell off your chair.
No, I wouldn't say that. So interestingly, and I only bring this up because I feel like it's relevant to like the whole story, but after that first year of college, my second year, I went back and I actually made some good friends. But I said, you know what, let me apply to other colleges back home just in case I end up wanting to transfer.
Mm.
And instead of like making a thoughtful decision, like, could I see myself moving in with these new friends? Could I see myself staying here for 4 years? Like the minute I got the acceptance to the new school, which was Fordham in the Bronx in New York,
Oh,
I just I just switched. Like I didn't even tell anyone. Like it was such an impulsive decision. And so impulsivity has been a very big thread throughout my adult life. So I'll say that. But yeah, going to forward to the fertility treatments, my husband and I got married, and I knew we wanted to have kids, got diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome because I wasn't getting a normal menstrual cycle. They were very irregular. Ended up going straight to the fertility doctor. Ended up doing IUIs. They failed. Doing IVF. It was a long journey. And then I feel like it was really when I became a mom more than anything that the ADHD started to surface more, because it's like,
hmm,
I don't know, I think I'm not type A. I wouldn't categorize myself that way, but like when I was doing fertility treatments, it was like I always had like a task at hand. Like I had a full-time job, I had my IVF stuff. Was just like highly motivated in so many ways, but then it's almost like when I ended up having twins and got thrown back into that like chaos
yeah,
that is completely unavoidable when you have baby twins.
yeah.
That's when it started to kind of resurface.
Well, you had so many more responsibilities, right? And the thing about parenting, as wonderful as it is, it can be really boring, right? It's like
Yes.
Groundhog Day. You finish one day and you think, phew, and then it starts again the next day.
I was actually just telling my friend that I'm actually 18 weeks pregnant with my third right
Oh,
now.
congratulations.
Thank you. And I was telling my friend that this time around, like I can't believe the when I was on maternity leave with the twins, I didn't like listen to audiobooks, because now I try to fill my brain with things like audiobooks and podcasts so that my brain doesn't just go in this circular motion of
Yeah.
overthinking and spiraling. And that just really killed me postpartum, because I was just in my own head all the time. And so I mean, again, you don't know what you don't know. So now this time I'm like, I am going to, babies are kind of boring sometimes. Like they sleep a lot.
Yeah.
I'm
And
just gonna let,
demanding, right? And we
yes,
have
I'm
these
gonna,
brains that there's things we want to do.
yeah. So definitely we'll approach it differently, but when you're in the thick of it for the first time, you just don't know any better.
So I am curious though, how do you go get fertility treatment and end up walking out with an ADHD diagnosis? Like, how did all of that come about?
I actually didn't. So I did fertility treatments with my twins 6 years ago. They're five now. Was knee deep in motherhood for years. Definitely had those symptoms arise again, but kind of just chalked them up to like, there's just so many responsibilities, like you
Yeah.
said. I also run my own business, Rescripted. So like there's just a lot of moving parts, and I kind of just thought, the mental load of being a mom and an entrepreneur. And then I started fertility treatments for this baby. And it was an even longer journey. It took me like 2.5 years to get pregnant with this
Wow.
baby, even via IVF. So between real, then it just escalated, because now I have two kids, a business, and fertility treatments that were
Hmm.
not working. So there was that grief involved,
Yeah.
and I just kind of, and actually one of my best friends that lives in my neighborhood, she's like an adult friend. We haven't known each other our whole lives, but we just kind of clicked when we met about 4.5, 5 years ago. And she has ADHD. She has diagnosed ADHD.
Hmm.
And she's the one that kind of hinted, like, or not even hinted, like we're really close. So she was just kind of like, oh, have you ever thought about
Hmm.
talking to someone about the possibility of having ADHD. she's and a lot of the things she said really resonated with me. The thinking you have anxiety and then it's really ADHD, or like the masking that you can actually be a really good student. Like she sent me some articles on how ADHD presents differently in women than men, because I just, even my mom and like people I tell now that I have ADHD, they're like, no, there's no way you have ADHD. Like you're not hyperactive. And I'm like, but I'm very inattentive. Um, so, just so many things she said really resonated. And so I had a psychologist at the time, and I literally made her read me the DSM and was like, and every single thing she said, I was like, yep, yep. So
Are you
that,
combined type or are you predominantly inattentive? Do you know?
well, this was probably over a year ago, so I might need some clarity on like where they overlap, but I would say I'm mostly inattentive, but I do have like the impulsivity.
Yeah. Hyperactive impulsivity. So you're
Yeah.
probably combined type. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times people get diagnosed and they don't tell them what type. It's just
Right. Right.
ADHD.
Then I saw a psychiatrist to kind of confirm, because I felt like almost like it wasn't real unless it was like
Yeah.
a real psychiatrist for
Yeah.
whatever reason. Like we invalidate ourselves all the time.
Mhm.
And so that was like the set in stone, okay, I do have this. And then there was like kind of I don't want to say grieving process, but like a a period of having to accept, like a period of acceptance, a period of, oh my God, this explains so much, a period of almost like griefy, like I wish I'd known this sooner, a period of kind of blaming things on my ADHD. Like I remember there was like a couple months at work after I got diagnosed, and I was like, oh, it's just because I have ADHD. And then I kind of pulled that back, and I was like, you know what? I have to start thinking about like the reasons it makes me stronger than, other than the reason, instead of the reasons that it makes me, like instead of my weaknesses, I have to
Yeah.
look at my strengths. So it's definitely been a roller coaster of just acceptance and grief and healing and like acceptance again, and that whole thing.
So what has changed since you were diagnosed?
I would say I just feel more like the term neurodivergent is really powerful in my opinion, because it literally means my brain doesn't work like other, like neurotypical people's
Hmm.
brains work. And in my line of work as a creative, and that I run a media company, like I think that's really why I am where I am. Like I
Yeah.
worked in corporate America in book publishing for 9 years, and I loved what I did, but my brain could never fully wrap my head around corporate life, like 9 to 5, like someone else makes the rules, like I'm just like a cog in a wheel. And then and so I started this side hustle. It was a blog at the time, a fertility blog. And it was like my outlet for a really long time. And then during COVID, I didn't have childcare, the world shut down. And I said, okay, if I'm really going to take this full time, now is the time, because I'm currently doing all three, parenting, full-time job, and this. So I quit my full-time job and said, even if it's only temporary, like, let's see if I can make this work. And just like it's running your own business, just like different every day. So like motivating, just knowing you have skin in the game and
Yeah.
you're a business owner, and it fulfills something in my brain that was really missing before.
Well, I think we're so mission driven too. And clearly you've got a mission, which
Hmm.
is a great segue to talk about Rescripted and what it is, what you do,
Hmm.
and why you decided to do it. And then I want to talk about PCOS and ADHD.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, Rescripted is a media platform for all women in their health, from first period to last period. It started as a fertility blog like 6.5 years ago. I just really felt alone on my trying to conceive journey. I was 28 going through fertility treatments. None of my friends were even trying to get pregnant, let alone in the middle of IVF. And no one at that time, I mean, we've come a long way in 6 years. At that time, no one was talking about IVF and fertility. Now we have celebrities coming out talking about it. So it just was really isolating, and I felt like there was no one really telling you what to expect. Like, not even the doctors were telling me what to expect. Like, my doctors were like, "Oh, you're young. You're gonna get all we need to give you is Clomid and to make you ovulate, and you're gonna get pregnant in no time." Fast forward a year later, I've had all these failed IUIs and I'm starting IVF. So it was just a kick in the gut every time. Like, it didn't work, and they were like, "Oh, I don't know why it didn't work." And so I like the first blog post I ever wrote was 10 things I wish I knew when I
Mm.
started fertility treatments, because it's like, and the number one thing was it's a marathon, not a sprint. The doctors, unfortunately, as educated as they are, everyone's body is so different.
Yeah.
So there's no way to know how your body's going to respond to certain medications,
It's
whether,
like mental
and then
health,
even,
right?
and then even if everything goes right, human reproduction is incredibly inefficient. And on the best day, IVF still only has like a 65% success rate per cycle, like, per transfer or whatever. So don't quote me on that, but like, it's not a perfect
Yeah.
science. It's amazing, and it provides, opportunity for so many people to come become parents, and I'm so thankful for it, but it's not a perfect science. And um so yeah, I just think that I felt so alone, and so I created this blog sharing my story, sharing other people's journeys, through donor eggs, through surrogacy, and it kind of became like the first ever digital publishing platform for infertility and non-traditional paths to parenthood. And then right around the time I left my full-time job, 24/7, I met my now co-founder, Abby, and we actually merged our businesses and started what's now Rescripted. And, we really together came to the conclusion that the reason so many women are blindsided by infertility diagnoses is because we're not taught enough about our bodies
Yeah.
from a young age. Like,
Yeah.
sex ed did us wrong from the
Hmm.
start. And, I shouldn't have been 28 and college educated before I knew that you had to ovulate in order to get pregnant.
Oh,
Like, I had full blown PCOS, and I'm still like, and I'm literally not getting my period, and I'm still like, am I pregnant?
oh,
Like, if I had been taught how my body worked instead of, if you have sex, you will get pregnant,
right. Right.
it would just have made all the difference. So that's when we branched out to all of women's health, and now we cover everything from, menstrual health to sexual health to even like perimenopause, PCOS,
Uh-huh.
endometriosis, you name it. And we like to say we offer science-backed women's health content in the voice of your best friend over brunch, because when you Google something as a woman, I mean, we've all done it. I have a UTI. It's like you
Mhm.
get these, I won't even name names, but like you get like very medical
Uh-huh.
articles, and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm dying. I have cancer." And we like to think like we reside in that gray area where it's like there may not even be an answer for you right the second about what you have, but like here's what you might have, and like here's the questions to ask your doctor, and here's how to advocate for yourself, in the real world, and ask the right questions and seek answers. And so that's what we're really here for, and we, are really passionate about just educating more women about their health and bodies. And because, I think like 60% of US counties don't have an OBGYN.
Oh, and it's getting worse, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. So, access to care is definitely a problem, but also you don't know what you don't know. I always say that. You just, something's going on and you aren't sure what it is, and you're kind of told it's all in your head, and, but you know your body, right?
Right, right. Or it's anxiety or depression. That seems to be the
Yeah.
one that
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what you
exactly.
have. Nope, it's in your head, or it's anxiety or depression, or both, right? Which it's in your
Or you
head.
need to go on birth control.
Oh, geez. Really?
What?
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
tell
Mhm.
us what PCOS is.
So, PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome or polycystic ovary syndrome. It is a hormonal disorder that affects 1 in 10 women of childbearing age. But it's a syndrome, so symptoms can kind of vary. For me specifically, I have very irregular periods. I have elevated androgens, so like male sex hormones like
Mm-hmm.
testosterone. So I get like I'm prone to acne. I
Yeah.
always have been. A lot of women see like weight. A lot of women have a component that's insulin resistance.
Mm.
So because it's like kind of like a cousin to type 2 diabetes. I don't have the insulin resistant PCOS, but definitely if you suspect you have PCOS, ask your doctor to check to see if you're insulin resistant, for sure. It's one of the leading causes of infertility because if you don't ovulate, you can't get pregnant. If you ovulate irregularly, it's just really hard to pinpoint when you should even try to get pregnant. So a lot of people think that you need to wait till you've been trying for a year to go to a fertility specialist. But most fertility specialists I know, like if you have irregular periods, you should be going to get a fertility evaluation because, again, you can't, there's a lot of technology out there that can help, but at the end of the day, it's such a frustrating process to like be like, oh, my period's every 55 days, and when in that span could
Yeah.
I possibly be ovulating? It's just like a guessing game no one wants to play.
So I have a story. When
Hmm.
my husband and I decided that we finally wanted kids because we waited as long as we could, I waited as long as I could. He would have been fine anytime.
Hmm.
I actually went to the doctor and I lied. And I said, we've been trying for a year because I wanted to get, it's so ADHD, right? I wanted to get all the testing out in front, make sure
That's
there
so
wasn't a
smart, though.
problem. I
That's so
still
smart.
remember that. I made him go through all the tests. I mean, it was, and there wasn't a problem. We got lucky, especially since we waited so long. But so with PCOS though, you don't even have to have irregular periods, right? Because my daughter was recently diagnosed with PCOS, a
Oh,
mild
no.
case. ADHD and PCOS, a mild case of PCOS does not have irregular periods, but she might have, it's interesting that you say that that androgen, right? That is really, so you're making more, is that testosterone then? You're making more testosterone?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
Because
it's
I
like
have the
the
same thing that
androgen
you're talking about in
gland.
terms of, I mean, I've always had oily skin and I'm so grateful for it now, but I struggled with all the same things as far as acne, and it would literally go away for years. And then all of a sudden it would come back, even into my 40s. I
Hmm.
would go through these bouts of acne. And so I'm actually, and I've always felt like I'm a man trapped in a woman's body.
Hmm.
Just like my personality and just kind of I am the kind of person who probably irritates a lot of women because what they always complain about is these partners that they have with that are telling them when they're upset, well, okay, let's do this and let's do that, and that is exactly how I am. So I irritate friends who just want to talk about it or complain about it. I'm like, what are we going to do to solve it? But
Yeah.
the more I hear about this PCOS, I'm thinking, I bet you she got it from me, and maybe a little bit from my mother-in-law too.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And it's frustrating because sometimes it's overdiagnosed, sometimes it's
Mm.
underdiagnosed, and it's like because it's not one size fits all,
Yeah. Well, it's
it's
like
really.
ADHD or any kind of mental health, right? It's different for every woman, and so what works for you may not work for me or her or any of it.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So, cousin to type 2 diabetes. So, if you have the insulin resistance, I just remembered you saying that. If you have the insulin resistance form of PCOS, what does that look like as compared to, I don't know what the other form is. What's the other form? The one where so if you're insulin resistance, are you also struggling with getting your period regularly?
It depends, I think the insulin resistance, it's like how you process sugar. So,
Right.
it could manifest as like, being overweight and stuff like that. But you have to ask for like an A1C test, a hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin, and fasting glucose. I think those are the three. And then they should be able to tell you if you have that. There's a drug called metformin that some women go on to help
Yeah.
manage that aspect. But yeah, I kind of just have always like my biggest symptom has always just been their irregular periods.
Nothing more than that in terms of really difficult periods. I mean, is PCOS related to what is it, postmenstrual dysphoric disorder? I think that's what
No,
it's.
they're not related. Well, at least to my knowledge. But no, I never really had really bad periods
Mm,
either. It was like 3 times a year periods that were moderate. It just, no matter what I did, it was really hard for me to get my period. Even like when I took a break from fertility treatments, about a year and a half ago, because it wasn't working, and I was like, let me try to do this holistically, and I worked with a nutritionist, and I actually had more regular cycles, but they were still like 45, 55 days, and it just wasn't predictable.
so is this genetic? Did your mom struggle with this as well?
So my mom did not, but my dad's sister and my
Oh.
dad's aunt, like they all had like somewhat of fertility issues.
Mm,
But back then, like IVF wasn't really a
yeah.
thing. So like I think my aunt took Clomid. My other aunt had a miscarriage at one point, and then but she ended up having 4 kids total. But like they both have 4 kids total actually, but like it wasn't always an easy journey. So I guess the difference now is that we have like more options sooner.
Yeah, exactly. So research also seems to indicate that there's a connection between PCOS and ADHD. Do you have any thoughts around that? I mean, I guess it makes sense because both conditions involve hormones, right? And neurological factors.
Yeah, well, and I've read that, just a woman's cycle in general can exacerbate ADHD symptoms.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Well, because of hormones, right? Estrogen
yeah,
modulates
exactly.
dopamine.
Yes. So, from that perspective, if your hormones are kind of out of whack with PCOS, it would make sense. For sure. I also have Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid autoimmune
Mm,
condition.
yeah.
So sometimes with that, like brain fog and stuff like that, when I'm not feeling 100%, that can kind of interfere as well. So when I got diagnosed, I decided I didn't end up going on Adderall or a stimulant, but I ended up going on Wellbutrin, which helps with anxiety, but my physician said it also can help with focus with
Yeah.
ADHD. And that's helped tremendously, like even just that little bit of help.
I have
Just
heard that over and over again from women who struggle with anxiety and depression and then discover they have ADHD. And it's
Mhm.
almost like it pops them out of, the anxiety and the depression. Was that your experience?
Yeah, so I was never on medication until I was postpartum with the twins. And like I said, I was very in my own head. I ended up
Yeah.
getting postpartum anxiety and had some like pretty scary thoughts, intrusive thoughts. So I ended up going on Zoloft and just kind of stayed on it because I realized that it sort of leveled me out.
Hmm.
And then I had a miscarriage in 2021, and that kind of like brought me back down. And my doctor said, okay, we can either bring up your dose of Zoloft or put you on like a really low dose of Wellbutrin. And I was hesitant to go on like a second medication. But once she said that it could also help with ADHD symptoms, I was like,
Mm.
amazing because I had been considering doing Adderall, or a stimulant, but I was just kind of hesitant because of and to each their own and like no judgment at all. But like personally was as a parent was hesitant to like for it to like hit 5 o'clock and like no longer work. Or like I heard there was a shortage and I was like, well, what if
Yeah.
I like I can't get it? Or, I saw like a bunch of funny TikToks about how like why would you make the medication for ADHD people like so hard to get. Like we have to like jump through hoops because like and like do
It's
all these
terrible.
logistic, back and forth to get our meds, which like we probably would like forgot to fill and we haven't taken for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly. Exactly. I never understand that abuse argument because I don't hear from people who get more medication and abuse it. I hear from people who forget to take the medication they're supposed to take. So you're
Yes.
so right. Why would we make it more difficult, especially if this is what you need to function? It's,
Yeah, exactly. So the Wellbutrin Zoloft combo has been a godsend for me. And when I got pregnant this time around, my OB was like, healthy mom, healthy baby, like stay on it if it's making you feel, you know, like yourself. And
yeah.
honestly, this will help us stay ahead of postpartum this next time
Mm-hmm.
around. So
Yeah.
just overall feel so much, better mentally. And another thing is like running my own business and having a co-founder that is more, so I'm the creative, she's the business minded person, and having that, like she's taught me so much about like organization and
Mm.
time management and being a mom. Like as much as it's thrown me into chaos in many ways, it's also like forced me to like put stuff in my calendar.
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of like today my kids' camp schedule over the summer is 11 to 4. So I literally have like 4.5 hours to
Yeah.
do my work, get my workout in, like, all the things. And so I it's a blessing and a curse because it's like in one way it's chaotic and can kind of exacerbate it, but on the other hand, it kind of can teach you to better manage your time because like time was like not a concept to me
Yeah.
before.
Absolutely. So one of the other things that I was just thinking about is PCOS and ADHD. They're also both associated with higher rates of anxiety and depression, right? Both of them. And
Yeah.
so it's all connected to this hormonal imbalance.
Hmm.
But sadly, we don't have the research to actually know much more than, it's that anecdotal, right? If this is how your experience, and I mean, is that the experience that you see from a lot of women with PCOS?
Just women's health conditions in general. Like we talk about this all
Mm,
the time at Rescripted, but women weren't included in clinical research until 1993. Like
yeah.
that's 30 years ago. I
Well, it's
mean,
still lame though, right? There's aren't there laws around? I remember studying this for the book, and now I've forgotten. But there was a law that was put in place that research has to involve a certain percentage of women, but they get around it all the time.
yeah, because they said something like hormones are too complicated,
Right.
and
And
I'm like, yeah,
expensive.
well, yeah, that's the point. But yeah, we just posted a stat the other day about how erectile dysfunction, which affects 19% of men, is
Hmm.
5 times more researched than PMS, which affects
Yeah.
90% of women. I was like, if that doesn't paint the picture, then I don't know what does.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, endometriosis takes on average 7 to 10 years to be diagnosed.
Oh my. And
70%.
so if you have endometriosis and you don't know that, there's damage, right, being done in your body. So it's much harder to get pregnant.
It's essentially tissue that is like the tissue
Yeah.
on the endometrium that's growing elsewhere in the body. So if it's on your uterus, yeah, it could cause fertility issues. So, but if you have really painful periods, some doctors are just like go on birth control, but then when you decide you want to have a family, then you go off birth control, and then it just kind of like I'm not anti-birth control. Birth control's helped me in so many ways with PCOS, but when I came off of it as a married woman, like wanting to start a family, that's when it was like, oh wait, all of these irregular period issues that I struggled with as a teenager are like did not go away. It's just that the birth control
Masked it.
masked there for
Yeah.
11 years. So that happens in the case in with endometriosis too, where like, okay, you have painful periods, go on birth control, but then when they come off birth control, they're just right back where they started and, may or may not have fertility issues. So Yeah, it's and then autoimmune is like a whole other bag of worms with getting diagnosed and
Yep.
because as a woman, I'll never forget. It was 2020. My kids were like a year and a half, or it was like end of 2019. My kids were like not even just a little over a year. I had just gotten over COVID, went to my PCP and was like, I've never been more exhausted in my life. And thankfully, I have a PCP that's like incredibly, just a listener and an advocate for women's health. But like, she could have easily been like, it's either repercussions from COVID or you're just a
Hmm.
tired mom.
Hmm.
And instead, she ran my thyroid levels, and my TSH was 110,
What's it supposed to be?
like 4.
Oh my gosh. That's the
Yeah.
one that if it's higher than 5, then there's a problem. But really, that's also specific to the person. Like if mine's higher than 1.5, I feel like crap.
Well, so for fertility, it should be under 2.5, more like under 1.5. But yeah, so like
It
it
was
was through,
110?
yeah, it was through the roof. I had hypothyroidism, but I also had the antibodies for Hashimoto's, went to get a sonogram and was confirmed, et cetera, et cetera. But like I just have seen time and time again where women go to the doctor, they're like, I know my body, I haven't been feeling like myself, I am exhausted, I have X, Y, and Z symptoms, and it's like, have you tried losing weight?
Yeah.
It's
No,
like,
that's the big one, right? Yeah,
yeah.
you're too fat. Okay. First of all, that is so obnoxious to say it, but
Yeah.
it's always about that, right? So we're either too fat or it's in our head or we have anxiety or depression or any of the other personality disorders, right? Any of the personality disorders.
Right. And I remember someone asking me like, what would it mean for you to get diagnosed with ADHD? Like, what difference would it make? And
Mm,
I feel like getting diagnosed with anything is sort of like just validation that you're not crazy. Like,
yeah.
I know myself and this doesn't feel normal and everyone's telling me it is. So now I
Right.
feel crazy, but I'm not crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. So, have you noticed that among the women that you work with and you talk to every day who are struggling with PCOS, is there a higher incidence of also struggling with postpartum once they give birth?
That's kind of a tough question because there's just so much that goes into it. So, like, for example, yes, women who struggle with infertility have higher rates of postpartum depression and
Mm.
anxiety because, I mean, I know for me, I was completely conditioned to getting bad news. And then all of a sudden, I got good news and was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then had a rough pregnancy because it was twins and then finally had healthy babies and was like, what's going to go wrong now? And like, so it's so different than when you get pregnant by accident and you're like, and then you have like no issues and it's all sunshine and rainbows and
So,
you
you're
have,
looking for what can go wrong instead of what can go right.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a form of trauma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So that I would say like I don't know about the connection between PCOS and postpartum, but like just in general infertility, IVF,
Mm.
and postpartum for sure.
But again, it's
Yeah,
hormones, right? It's hormonal,
exactly.
so it makes perfect sense that there would be more of a struggle with postpartum depression.
Yeah, yeah.
That roller coaster, the
Mhm,
up and down.
exactly.
So I'd love to know, in the middle of all of this, you decided, okay, mission driven ADHD woman, I'm going to help other women not go through what I went through, or at least have an easier time because
Mhm.
I'm going to be here with all my resources. I would love to know, what do you think has really helped you that your ADHD is responsible for in your business and building your business?
Yeah, so I'm just like you said, self-starter, really motivated. When I have a passion, I want to do something with it. And from the moment I decided, like, I'm going to start a blog, like, I'm going to help people feel less alone on their journey, it was like a hyperfixation. I call Rescripted like my greatest hyperfixation because when you own it, when it's yours, you just want to keep improving on it. So, I mean, in 6 years, it's had so many different iterations. I think one of the best things I did was like merging with my co-founders because they have very different brains than I do. And so it allows me to flourish in the ways that I do bad, like in the things that I excel at. So
Hmm.
I'm allowed to be there's three of us. I'm allowed to be the creative one because that's what lights my soul on fire. Abby is the business minded one, and our third co-founder Pear is he builds our entire site. He's our CTO. So we all have very different roles, and it was really bothering me before when it was just me, when I had to like do contracts and invoices. I'm like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And it was making me resentful. And so, obviously, as an entrepreneur, there's still things that, you have to do that you may not want to do. But just having that freedom to like be the creative mind behind the business and, decide where we're going content wise and writing and editing and submitting to, Today Parents and like just doing all the things, collaborations, it just really lets me be me and not get caught up in all the noise. Like I joke with my co-founder, like the only time I get upset or frustrated about work is when like I'm copied on an email from a partner that like gets so in the weeds with like ops and mundane stuff and I'm just like I'm gonna lose my mind. So I think it's a superpower to recognize that like you have your strengths and then you
Hmm.
have I don't even want to say weaknesses, but like for me it's just stuff that doesn't interest me,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
It's not a weakness if we don't care about it, right? I think we make
Exactly.
them weaknesses.
Exactly. Actually, funny story, my co-founder Abby, she's one of my best friends too, but she will be on a meeting about like product or ops or something like really mundane, and she'll be like, Kristyn, can you zone back in for the next 5 minutes? Like she'll cue me because she knows that I'm multitasking
Right.
because like it sounds like a different language to me. But then if she tells me to zoom in, I'm like, okay, I'm honing in right now, and this is important and relevant to my day to day. But like if she's not saying that, then like I can kind of just like be a fly on the wall and that's cool. But having people like surrounding you that get that and who like support that and are just like even my husband like was initially skeptical that I had ADHD because he was like he had this picture in his head of what ADHD
Hmm.
was, but now like he totally recognizes it and it explains so much. And even like with our kids now we're able to kind of like neither of my kids has been diagnosed, but one of them I'm like, maybe some of that inattentiveness that
Mm,
I now see in myself looking back, but I didn't know it then.
yeah,
And just being able to support her in a way that I didn't have.
absolutely. So, what advice would you give to women with similar health conditions who are considering IVF? ADHD women.
So it's so hard being an ADHD impulsive, like impatient person going through IVF. Like, just there's so many, it often takes way longer than you think it's going to take. Not even like the actual egg retrieval part, but just like from consultation to transfer to getting to like 12 weeks pregnant. It's like every week there's like a milestone that you have to pass. And like I sometimes look at my kids and I'm like, they're absolute miracles. I don't even know how they're here. Like there's
Yeah.
so many different things that have to happen. And so it just really a test of your patience. And the mental load can be hard. One thing I did that I thought was helpful is my husband's like way more type A than me. So I made him manage all of the medications because I was like,
Mm.
I had to take like 5 different shots at different times of the day. Like this is gonna get messed up somehow.
Oh my
So like
gosh.
a buddy system, like I was like I need someone really type A to manage this for me. So just, and then it also gives him like a job in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Just tell me
So
what to do.
yeah, so asking for help when you need it, um, but just letting yourself feel all the emotions, it's really hard. But, and the meds can kind of play with your brain too, because it's all hormonal.
Yeah.
I don't think I even put that together until I kind of blacked out my whole first IVF journey. Like I was in the middle of parenting and but then this time around I was able to like focus on it in a different way, like knowing what I know now. And so I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I definitely see how it's affecting me, like mentally, not even just like feeling
Yeah.
physically ill or anything, just like mentally.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. I salute everyone who's going through fertility treatments. But there's always hope. And I mean, I was about to give up this time around. I was like, I have two kids, this isn't working. It's just like ruining my mental health. And then we decided to try one last time and it worked. So a lot can happen in one cycle.
Yeah. And it's almost that where you just kind of give up and then the next day there's like the best news ever, right? It's,
Yeah, it's like we said to ourselves, if this round doesn't work, we're done. And you know,
the
just
universe listened to you.
the timing, So, and it was weird. My husband lost his job the day that I found out how many embryos we got. And we lost our fertility insurance like
Oh,
right after my transfer and found right after I found out I was pregnant. So it was like,
wow.
how does that even happen?
Wow. Yeah.
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 So-
Absolutely. So, Kristyn, where can people find you if they want to know more about you and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so head over to Rescripted. It's rescripted.com and at Hello Rescripted on all social platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, etc. We also have a podcast. It's called From First Period to Last Period, where we dive into all of the women's health topics that have long been considered taboo, from periods to sexual health to UTIs, etc. So
Thank you so much for spending time with us here today.
absolutely, thank you, Tracy. Thank you for all you do for women with ADHD.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do for women with, well, it sounds like all kinds of health problems now, right?
Yes,
Health
yes.
challenges. So,
Yep, all are welcome.
that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Kristyn, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD and women, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you here next week.